$7,000 cash. We used all of it.
The total amount that we spent for the trip was...
We're the Crawfords. We have 6 kids. In 2018, we set out to do the Appalachian Trail.
Bye!
A 2,200-mile hike from Georgia to Maine. It was hard, but 14 states and 161 days later, we finished it. Together.
Look at us in our little striped tank tops. I am like dreading making this video because calculating and keeping track of massive amounts of data is not my strong suit. And I'm worried to death that I'm gonna like miss something and it's not gonna be accurate. We're gonna do the best we can. So we're gonna be talking about how much money we spent on our entire journey doing the Appalachian Trail together as a family of 8. We started on March 1st and went to August 9th. So it was 161 days, which is 5+ months, 23 weeks. Now for this trail, most people like say to budget around $5,000 a person. This is what the REI website says. It's like $5,000 a person for this entire trip. So for us, not really knowing like what we're gonna get into, and we thought we're a larger family, so this is gonna take us longer and probably cost us more, we budgeted around $50,000 emotionally or mentally before the trip getting started. We had more than that, but that was like, okay, I'd feel fine if I spent, which still actually sounded like a lot of money when you just like look at it that way, like $50,000. But that's how much we were prepared to spend. So I want to share with you guys, first of all, how I calculated our expenses. At first, I set off to like try and keep track of every expense. And you can see that it lasted 12 days. And then I was like, okay, that's not happening. Because when you're hiking, the last thing you can think about is where to put little tiny pieces of paper with numbers on them. So what I ended up doing was I printed up every single one of our credit card statements, and I also kept track of the amount of cash that we went with, and I just did all the math afterwards. So that's how I came up with this number. So without further ado, let's tell you how much we spent. Well, the amount that we put on credit cards was $18,040. And the amount that we spent on cash was $7,000. We took $6,000 with us originally, and we got another $1,000, and we spent all of it. So total for the trip, the amount that we spent...
Coffee time. I haven't done this in a while.
What was I just talking about?
$7,000 cash. We used all of it.
The total amount that we spent for the trip was $25,040. Which, if you're comfortable with this, we're just going to round it to $25,000. Is everyone comfortable with this?
Some people probably would be.
Some people are like, see, they're cheating. I knew it this whole time. So let's talk about what is included in this $25,000. This includes food, hotels, and lodging, which was one of the biggest expenses. And we had 40 nights where we stayed in hotels or hostels or cabins that we paid for. This covers gas. We took trips off the trail and things like that. This covers shuttles, a side trip to Washington, D.C. that we did for the day, donations that we gave to people and hostels who helped us out, national park fees. The Smokies was like $160 just for our family to go in. 2 movies that we saw in theaters.
I'm just laughing. I'm like, we paid money to go to walk through a blizzard.
Yeah, that was a terrible deal. 2 movies that we saw in theaters, which was one of the worst expenses of our entire trip, watching Avengers something or other, and then Incredibles 2. I don't even want to talk about it.
The kids liked Avengers.
Lobster, even the next day after we finished the trail, a lobster lunch that was fairly expensive. That was $130. Allowances for our kids, which we give our kids $1 a year a week. So our 15-year-old makes $15 a week. And that totaled to be about $1,400, which is a fairly large expense. And that's money that basically goes straight to candy, it seems like, at least on the trail.
Educating them on how to spend their money.
But while we're talking about some of these expenses, I want to talk about a few of the efficiencies that we experienced as a large family. Probably the biggest one was hotels. So a lot of people stay in hotels while on the trail, or hostels and things. And when you stay in a hotel room, a lot of times it's 1 or 2 people. Well, our family, we had to get 2 hotel rooms really every time. There was one night we couldn't because they only had one available.
And that was crazy.
And we're guaranteed 4 people per room on each of these nights, which is actually really efficient. And I think we experienced a lot of these things where we just had a lot of meals that didn't go to waste. We were very efficient just by the nature of having a large family. So while it did seem really expensive in a way, like compared to 8 people hiking it individually, I think it was cheaper. Also included in this $25,000 number is quite a bit of equipment that we had to buy, which some people I think would have included that in their starting amount and not included that in the cost of the actual trip. But we spent $410 on a quilt for the 3 youngest kids that was just warmer and less weight. We spent $384 on 2 new backpacks. Well, we spent a total of, I think, $700 on trekking poles, which means that's about $1,400 went to equipment, which one we get to reuse. So I don't know, maybe that's all there is to say about that. So for this $25,000, let's talk about what was not included. We did not include the cost of our airfare to leave the trip. That was $1,910. We flew from Portland, Maine to Seattle, which we did include the $300 shuttle price in the figure we gave you, but not the airfare, because I feel like that's kind of an optional post-trip thing.
We could have walked back.
Yeah, saved a few bucks. I didn't include $459, which went towards our marathon registration for the marathon that we ran in the middle of our trip. I didn't include $580 that we spent on your iPhone because you just left your old one out
a little wet
in the rain. But that was like, iPhone is kind of going out anyways. And $120 we spent on a 360-degree camera because that was like purely superfluous vlogging equipment. And I also didn't include the money we spent on cigars for 2 reasons. One is almost all the cigars we already had and we brought with us. Second of all, a lot of cigars were given to us on the trail. And I've been meaning to make a separate video about this, but I'm just gonna pound out the question now because I imagine there's a lot of especially the homeschooling moms out there who are planning trips like this and they're asking this question, Ben and Cami, if we go on a thru hike, how many cigars should we bring? Can we count on cigars being provided by Trail Magic? And I would say, no, you can't count on it. I mean, we got really lucky by having people who had seen our videos and provided us really some amazing cigars. I want to point out, Omelet Man hooked us up big time with, that was more quantity than quality. We also had some Cubans shipped to our house that our parents were able to bring, so we were to celebrate with those.
That was more quality than quantity.
But you shouldn't count on cigars being provided for you on trail, so you should pack them. And also, you're not allowed to ship them to yourself via USPS, which I'm not going to say anything more about that. Finally, and Kemi's just pointing this out to me now, one more figure we didn't include is the boxes that we shipped to ourselves. That was probably about $100 worth of food, maybe $200. But we bought that ahead of time, and I wouldn't really do that again, so don't worry about that. The second big section we're going to talk about is income that we made while on the trip that was actually related to our trip. So we had other income coming in from different businesses and property and just investments and things like that. But I went and I calculated things from income related to our trip, and I want to share that because I think that's really important. We rented our house out while we were gone, which was one of the best moves that we made. And like after expenses, we made about $10,000 from Airbnb from our house. So the expenses are every utility. We're talking like internet and gas and water and all that kind of stuff. And that even includes $2,000 worth of improvements we made on the house, which now we get to benefit from. That includes paying out my sister who managed the property and house cleaners and everything. So that's just $10,000 worth of profit for leaving our house that would have just been vacant. So I think that was actually really cool and surprising. I don't know.
It was basically $2,000 a month while we're gone. We're making.
I just remember the last week before we were leaving, and we're trying to pack our stuff at the trail, and we're trying to flip our house over to get it ready for renters, and putting all of our stuff in the basement, our personal effects. And it was just so hard to think, is this worth it? But $10,000 I think was worth it. Second of all, we had $993 that people donated to us on Patreon, just from the link below in our videos, and an additional $1,109 from people on PayPal. That were just donations from people that watched our videos. That was really cool. Now, a few things I want to talk about in regards to income. We don't make any other money from our videos. This is a conscious decision we've made not to get ad revenue, which means that when you watch our videos, there's no little advertisements on YouTube, or at least there shouldn't be, which is just a kind of a personal decision we made and we're very happy with. So that means we don't have to think about money when we're actually making the content. We just make whatever we think is the best or truest stuff. So we want to pause right now and just say thank you to all of those people that contributed money to our journey through Patreon, through PayPal. That was a financial contribution, but it was also a real emotional contribution, just to know that some people had our backs out there, and that was really nice.
And what we were doing was worth it to them. Was cool. That's a cool thing. Yeah.
A few notes I also want to add about this income is that we have worked very, very hard to eliminate debt and eliminate unnecessary expenses from our regular life. And I think that's one of the reasons why we were able to do this trip to begin with. So we have no debt at home, and that's consumer debt on credit cards. We paid them off every month, and we also have no mortgage. So I want to give a quick shout out to no debt, because when people look at our life and they're like, oh, how can they do that? They must be rich. We've had different times where we've had different amounts of income coming in, but the biggest thing that has changed our lifestyle and given us the ability and freedom to make trips like this has been actually not having debt. Also, we have fairly low expenses. Very few reoccurring things. We have car insurance. We have a cable bill that was paid for by the rentals. We don't even have health insurance. And I know that's kind of a shocking thing to some people, but we've just decided that we'd rather spend our money in other sure ways that have a return on our family than other things that we haven't seen give us a return for what our values are. So if you were to break this all down, and if you were to take $25,000, which is how much we spent, and subtract around $12,000, it was actually $12,102, we're just going to round it to 12, then what you would come up with is the number $12,938, which is how much came out of our pocket for this trip. We're just going to round that to $13,000. So if you divide that by 161 days, it cost our family $80 a day to do the entire Appalachian Trail, which means that's $10 a person. Part of the reason why I think this number is so low is we experienced an incredible amount of generosity while on the trip. A couple main things were Ultra Running Company provided shoes for our family for the entire final 2/3 of the trip. So we went through 7 times 3, 21 pairs of shoes for those of us that walked. That's not including Rainier shoes, which you lost quite often. And they paid for 14 of those pairs of shoes, which is about $2,000 worth of shoes. And another huge help that we had was people that provided meals for us. People brought us meals, they paid for meals, they invited us to their home and fed us a meal. And I tried to go through and calculate how many meals were provided for us, which is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And I calculated about 97 meals were provided for us. So I was trying to figure out how much was that worth to us just from a financial perspective. And it's kind of tricky because when we're eating out in the woods, we could get a meal for about $12. I mean, it's really 8 boxes of macaroni and cheese, it can be $12. But when we came to a town or a restaurant, we'd spend about $150 a meal. But we'd eat a lot more, and it was a lot better for us in a way, just because we were able to consume our calories. So I think most of the meals that were provided for us were closer to a restaurant than they were the macaroni and cheese. So if you value them at about $50 a meal, that's $4,850 worth of meals.
Wow. Were
just given to us from people. So either way you look at it, we spent $25,000 on this trip, or $13,000 after we take into account the income. I just want to talk about some observations that we have when we see this number, or some things that we feel, because that seems like a large amount of money, I guess, in one perspective, and then in one perspective it seems like nothing.
Yeah, to be able to do this incredible adventure, kind of a vacation, for 5+ months for our whole family for $13,000. I mean, if we were at home, I don't even know. It'd be fascinating to crunch the numbers being at home for 5 months, because I'm pretty certain that it would be way higher than that $13,000.
And I have the feeling that a lot of families don't mind spending, ourselves included, like let's say $5,000 or $10,000 on a dream vacation to go to either Disneyland or the Bahamas.
That's like a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's a week, but this was 23 weeks. It's almost 6 months of solid time together. In fact, today commemorates 6 months that we haven't been home.
Been gone, yeah.
We left our home 6 months ago today. And I feel like, when we look at that type of number, a lot of times we don't mind spending that type of money, $13,000 on a car, or, if it's a business expense for work, it's like no big deal. We don't mind making investments for things that we believe will have a positive change on a business. But for family, it's hard to imagine spending $13,000 on something this like epic or large. But the bottom line is, for us, it was totally worth it. And I'm even talking for the $25,000. If you don't even take into account the income. So if you're trying to plan a trip like this and you're thinking, man, $25,000. And I'm just thinking, let's say a family makes $60,000 a year, which we've made at times in our marriage. That would be about half a year's worth of income. You'd have to save up for a while, or even the $12,000 is really, 1/5 of a year's worth. It doesn't feel like a lot to me for how much we got. So many people in the comments said about our experience, your kids are going to remember this forever. And I believe that. It's not why we did it. It's just to create memories. But I can't think of a better way to spend $12,000 or $25,000 for our family to get what we want. I just can't.
If you believe in challenges as a family and kind of getting out of your element, which is what we did for 5+ months, I mean, you can do that in a smaller way, like take a 2-week backpacking trip, 1-week backpacking trip. But you're going to have to believe in it enough to put down some money for it. But it is interesting in our culture that it seems like more people believe in Disneyland, and I understand that because I was there too, but in Bahamas and these types of trips that are just like entertainment based versus doing something adventurous and hard but rewarding with your family.
And I think it's cheaper to do adventure over entertainment. Like $80 a day, our family couldn't afford to go see a movie in a theater for that.
Yeah.
So for $80 a day, that includes all of our lodging, food, entertainment, if you call walking entertainment, health care, or being healthy and getting exercise. Like we didn't need a health club membership in this time. Even education, I feel like was taken care of a lot. Yeah. For $80 a day, that's nothing. And
you might have to invest, at the beginning and because if you don't have a lot of backpacking equipment, like you're gonna have to like invest some in that.
For those of you that are considering to do this trail, you know, one thing that our numbers reflect, the $12,000, $13,000 that we ended up spending, I feel like we lived a pretty extravagant life for the Appalachian Trail. We didn't say no to anything because we couldn't afford it. The fact of the matter is, there's just not a lot of ways to spend money out there. You know, when you come into a town, you can only spend so much on hotel. You can only spend so much on food, whatever you can eat, really. And we did that. We bought whatever we could eat.
Or entertainment, I suppose.
And you can't buy stuff because you have to carry it. So
yeah.
There's only so much you can buy and carry. So we said, you know, we spent a ton of money on really almost anything we wanted. I mean, we're talking ice cream and pop and desserts and food. We had, you know, a couple nights where we had to pay, I think, $500 for hotels, buffets. If you're trying to just like budget your Appalachian Trail adventure and think about it, like, I feel like we kind of lived it up. And I was really glad that we did that. I was glad we were able to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, we still said no to things because we thought they were like a bad deal, or like the efficiency or budgeting, not budgeting side of me, but the, I don't know, I just like, I hate getting like ripped off or like unnecessarily spending money. Yeah. But we also spent $23 at a vending machine, I remember, and just like weird things. The final thing I'll say is that if you are planning your Appalachian Trail adventure and you're trying to decide how much to budget, I think this is one of the rare cases where more money is actually better. I'm not a huge proponent of saying, you know, you need more money to have fun. Like, you know, I think you can do awesome things on a shoestring budget. But what we found is that having more money, it gave us a lot more options. We saw some other groups of people where a couple of the people in the group had more money and a couple had less. And because of that, they were like saying, oh, well, we can't even stay together as a group because the people want to stay in a hotel, but the other people couldn't afford it. And I thought that was kind of unfortunate. For us, we knew that we could always stay in a hotel. Sometimes we decided not to, or go into town because like shuttles were just really expensive sometimes. Mm-hmm. But in the back of our minds, we always knew we could. So I would say, I don't know, maybe $5,000 is way enough. But if you have the choice of taking extra money on the Appalachian Trail and you're going to do it, I think it's great to have that type of flexibility. All right, well, we're still in Yakima. We're going to be leaving in a couple days. I hope this video is helpful for some of you. And we talk about finances around here because we think it's an important part of the equation, and we want you guys to help understand, like, not just the fun, sexy part of the videos where you saw us having fun and climbing mountains, but there is a behind the scenes where these things do cost money. So hope that was helpful. And it's Friday. So we're gonna be resting tomorrow before we leave back to drive home. Mm-hmm. So we hope you guys are able to find rest from work, and also from a lot of times having to think about money and making more of it, spending less of it. That's a lot of work too. One of the biggest things we've had to find rest from. So we will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.